Om Swastiastu. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. My name is Kartawan. I am a faculty member of Performing Arts in the Asian Institute of the Arts of Denpasar. Today, I would like to present a paper entitled The Layout of Instruments in the Context of Teaching Strategies and Performance of Balinese Gamelan Music at the University of Canterbury. I would like to continue my presentations with slides. This topic is part of my research project entitled Melajah Nabuh, Teaching Balinese Gamelan within the context of the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. A literal translation of Melajah is learning, and Nabuh is a term which encompasses most aspects of the aesthetics of Balinese Gamelan music. Nabuh derives from tabuh, a composition or a song, and refers to how the music ideally should be performed. Nabuh includes concept of tonal quality, rhythm, melody, form, style, character, and ensemble cohesiveness. To achieve Nabuh is the goal of every gamelan ensemble, whether in Bali or overseas. Nabuh is to achieve the sense of the music, a state in which the elements contributed by each of the instrumentalists becomes one. In other words, the sound of gamelan moves beyond music with a spiritual and charismatic dimension to create the unique spiritual world of Bali. In this presentation, I would like to share my findings on the importance of the layouts of the instruments in the rehearsal and on stage as a factor of to help achieve the goal Nabuh. This morning, I will focus on how the layout of instruments affects the process of learning and performing. I have not located any other literature on this topic, and that the terminology and concepts used have been developed for the purpose of my research. Before I continue to the next slide, I would like to explain briefly about the Balinese Gamelan Gong Kebiar. In Bali, there are many kinds of ensemble involving different types and quantities of the instrument. Gong Kebiar has typically 25 instruments and musicians. Most instruments of Gong Kebiar ensemble are also tuned in pairs. The lower of the pair, called Pengembang, is slightly lower in pitch than the upper one, which called Pengisap. The instruments of Gong Kebiar ensemble are divided into 4 functional groups: melodic, elaboratic, colotomic, and rhythmic. The instruments that play the basic melody include ugal, trombone, jagogan, jublag, suling, and rebab. The gangsa pemadai, gangsa kantilan, and riong are known as elaboration instrument. This instrument usually play kotekan or kekilitan, syncopated pattern based on the basic melody. The kotekan consists of 2 parts. Polos, which is usually played on beat, and sangse complements the polos by playing off beat. The gong, kempur, klemong, and kajar are colotomic instruments. Which mark the internal melodic division, the beginnings and the endings of the cyclic melodies. The rhythmic vitality, which includes cueing and accenting and dynamic changes, is provided by kendang, while the cheng-cheng provided additional accents. This study was guided by a qualitative case study approach. This allowed me to obtain an understanding of the students' behavior during the teaching learning processes, and to understand how the traditional teaching style can be negotiated to find an effective way in the teaching Balinese music to students at the University of Canterbury. Participants were students who were enrolled in the music course and were participating as community members and previous teachers who had experience working with UC Gamelan. The data was collected through questionnaires, interviews, and participant observation. And data analysis, there are three main steps are guiding the data analysis: transcription, organization, and identification of the teams. The findings concerning the various models of the layouts of the instrument fit into two categories: rehearsal and performance. Not all of 25 instruments in Gongkabiar ensemble were used in this model, since we had only 15 students who joined the group. The layout of each model was focused mostly on elaboration group. As I mentioned before, this group is responsible for playing the two different rhythmic patterns intertwined simultaneously, kotekan. Learning kotekan involves memorizing difficult motifs and playing in the fast tempo. Therefore, an appropriate layout of the instrument was needed to help them learn the music quickly. During the whole year of the class program, I experimented with 4 different models of instruments layout. I have named this model the classical model, sectional model, opposite sectional model, and a composite model. In order to facilitate student learning during the class, the core melody of the piece was notated on whiteboard for the melodic instrument. Several parameters were adjusted to decide the optimal layout of the instruments for rehearsal and performance. These parameters were the ability of each member of the group to hear clearly and accurately the timekeeping instrument alongside the melodic and the partnering instrument. The ability of each group member to see other musicians, the instructor, and the whiteboard in rehearsal. The ease with which the instructor can move around and between the instrument in rehearsal, and for the in performance, for the audience to be able to see and hear the instrument and player, as well as be positioned to take in cohesive aesthetic effect of the gamelan as a whole. These parameters provided a basis for ongoing student comments and instructor experimentation. Initially, the layout of instruments was not considered a supporting aspect for teaching strategies to achieve gamelan, to achieve nabu for gamelan, for UC Gamelan student. As a teacher, I overlooked the potential for the change of layout instrument to influence my ability to teach gamelan effectively. However, during the course of the year, I found considerable scope for improvement of this area. During the first 5 weeks of the first semester, the classical model was used as normal part of the teaching process. Actually, this model is commonly used by Balinese musicians in Bali, both in rehearsal and performances. The instruments in the classical model are mostly in line up in straight position. Kena is positioned in the front, as well as the ugal in the center. The Gangsa Pemade and Kantilan are situated in combination based on the patterns they play with, polos and sangse. During that period, I focused mainly on teaching playing techniques, providing historical context of the music, and preparing the student for the upcoming performances. For these purposes, I share the sound recording, video links, notation, and teaching unit of each piece to help students learn the music effectively. Although most students recognized that these materials were useful, they also wanted additional learning support. they commented that the classical model was not appropriate to use to learn a new piece. One of the beginner students commented, "It would be better for us to play in a group with the same parent, especially in the rehearsal situation. This will allow us to support one another in each group." This statement encourages me as a tutor to create appropriate model of the layouts of instrument to facilitate student learning. However, as a culture bearer, I wondered what was wrong with this model. The classical model has been used in teaching, learning, and performing gamelan in music in Bali since I started playing in music in the 1980s and was in use for many years before. The first photographic evidence of the layout instrument was in the 1930s by MPAC, which shows the classical model. Taking into consideration student comments and my perception of the situation, therefore, I developed the sectional model. The layout of instrument in the sectional model was similar to classical model. However, in this model, the Gangsa Pemadi and Gangsa Kantilan were grouped based on their pattern, polos and sangse. They were divided into two groups. One group was positioned in the left of Ugal, while the other was on the right side. This model facilitated those who were playing the same pattern to reinforce each other. For example, I frequently teach the music from a position facing opposite the Gangsa Pemadi players. The Gangsa Kantilan players who sit behind the Gangsa Pemadi players usually follow and imitate the pattern played by Gangsa Pemadi. At this point, playing the same pattern together was much easier for them. Also, this model helped players who had to struggle with the beat when they were playing kotekan, syncopated pattern. A few weeks after the application of this model, some challenges appeared. The Kantilan players said that they could not see the notation written on the right board, since the Pemadi players handled their views. The same issue occurred also in previous layout classical model. The Gangsa players experienced difficulties when they were encouraged to play the pattern, polos, and sangse. Simultaneously, since they played different patterns, and it was difficult to synchronize. In addition, they were unaccustomed to playing next to one another. This was discernible considering that polos and sangse patterns must interweave in order to perform the kotekan accurately. During the first 3 weeks of second semester, I focused on issues facing the Kantilan players. Therefore, the opposite sectional model was developed to resolve the obstacles. This model allowed the Kantilan players to view the notation on whiteboard as well as to follow and copy the Gangsa Pemadi. In addition, coordination between the two separate groups playing different patterns, polos and sangse, became easier. In the opposite sectional model, the Gangsa Pemadi, Gangsa Kantilan that played the same pattern, polos and sangse, were grouped together facing each other, while the Kendang and Chencheng were positioned in the back, in the center, and Gong, Kamong, and Jagogan and Jublag remain in the back. Although opposite sectional model had been able to overcome the problem faced by Kantilan players, other issues remained. As occurred in classical sectional model, this model inhibited the free movement of the teacher between the instrument and players. It also created difficulties for the polos and sangse groups since they were separated apart from one another on the two different sides of gamelan. In order to determine the most appropriate model for resolving these issues, I created the composite model. The composite model places Gangsa, Pemade, Gangsa Kantilan, Ugal, and Kajar in U-shaped formation. Here, the Gangsa Pemade and Gangsa Kantilan, Polos and Sangse are not grouped together, but are positioned across from each other. The Kenang and Cheng remain in the middle, while the Gong, Kempur, Cekogan, and Jublak remain in the back. This model helped all Gangsa players to see the whiteboard and make contact with one another, in addition to gaining available space to serve the Kantilan members. This model allowed me to help other players. The layout of the instrument on this model facilitates more teacher-student interaction. In addition, it encourages the Gangsa players to improve their individual skill playing kotekan because they were able to play the next to each other. The majority of students realized that the composite model helped them to learn the music effectively. Based on the survey, 95% commented that this model was very effective. The Balinese Gamelan music performance is a collective activity comprising many types of instruments which are played by a group of musicians. Performing Gamelan music requires tight coordination among the musicians because there is no conductor. In the Balinese Gamelan, one or two musicians, ugal or kendang, frequently lead the performance while performing on their instrument. For example, ugal provides cues for starting a piece, to guide the melody, lead the dynamic changes, and to give a signal for terminating the piece. Further, kendang provides cues for dynamic accent and tempo changes. Ugal and kendang are necessarily played in the front or the center to facilitate this role. This central position allows other musicians to see both of them. The layout instrument in the ensemble is an essential aspect of the gamelan performances. It is essentially related to aesthetic consideration, both oral and visual. The layout is designed to achieve the wholeness of the interlocking musical patterns, the unique instrument sound, and the intensity of music in the ensemble. Gamelan performance involves the visual expressions of instrument, how they are applied, and their overall auditory experience. In relation to other visual aspects, most gamelan instruments are made in unique cases with colorful carvings and painting. The carvings motif include karang down leaves, karang sari, karang guak, thunderbirds, pata Cina, Chinese motif, pata Mesir, Egyptian motif, pata kakul, snails motif, pata wayang, puppet motifs, and others. The following figure is an example of the configurations of the Gangsa Pemade and Gangsa Kantilan as generally applied in gamelan performance in Bali. During the class program, I applied three layouts models: classical, sectional, and composite model, depending on particular setting of each situation. There were different perceptions among the students for utilizing the three models in the performance. However, most students preferred to use the composite model. They regarded that this model facilitated them doing interaction during the performance. It was important to allow musicians to hear the instrument sound clearly while being able to see their fellow musician. This was equally important for the audience to be able to see all the musicians and to hear the music clearly. It can be summarized that students expect that the appropriate layout of the instruments can facilitate coordination during performance, the cohesion and the wholeness of musical patterns, the ensemble compactness, then the improvement of individual skill, including listening skill, memorizing, self-belief, and awareness of the role of other players. These aspects are in line with achievement the goal NABU. This paper has presented my finding on issue of the layout of the instruments of the Gamelan learning period. I summarize that finding of this research are: each layout model had its advantages and disadvantages, and a model selected for rehearsal may not be appropriate for performance. However, the composite model shows the best potential in rehearsal for UC Gamelan group. Since all the instruments of the Gongkebiar were not involved in this model, further research is needed to address the issue related to the other instrument, and also the transition from the ideal model both in rehearsal and performance. And the last, the finding of my research only apply to this situation at the University of Canterbury, which includes myself as a teacher and researcher. As such, they cannot be generalized to other situations. However, it is hoped that the findings and discussion will be interest to other teachers of Gamelan and contribute to the pedagogy of Gamelan instruction. Thank you. Om Santi, Santi, Santi. Om.